Hey Power Platform Junkies! Today we're going to be looking at one of the PowerFX functions inside of Power Apps, the patch function. So patch allows you to create records or even modify them. Usually we use it to patch or create new records inside of a SharePoint list or even a Dataverse table. But rarely have I seen people use it to update or modify an existing record. And today we're going to look at how you can do both inside of Power Apps. Let's head over to the demo. So to get started, I have this maintenance request SharePoint list. It's very empty, it has a few fields, it has a title, request ID, machine priority, and so forth. And all of these are different data types. But we're going to try and patch information into this SharePoint list. So let's head over to our Power App. So I just created a quick Power App from the SharePoint list with this template. And usually what you would find with this template is that you already have all of the functionalities that you need. You can create a new item, you can be able to add all of those details, and then you can be able to edit and delete it. But what happens if you don't want to use the built-in formulas that come with these templates, where you want to patch specific records and you want to make those updates yourself? So this is where our demo today is going to help us. So instead of using this screen, I have another blank screen that has all of those different fields that I was talking about earlier on. So I have the title, the request ID, the machine, the priority, and so forth, because it is a maintenance request example. So the first thing that we're going to do is try and patch new information from these different fields that we put on our app using the patch function and send it to our SharePoint list. So I'm going to quickly add a new button. And as I add this button is just probably going to be called something like, let's open the properties up really quick. And it's going to be called do stuff because we want it to do something, which is send information back into our SharePoint list. And in here, what we're going to do, which is the normal way of sending data back into your SharePoint list. Whereas if you're using the template, you would just use the submit form because maybe you have a form that is already built into your data and into your application. So in our case, we just want to use it with our free text controls that we already have on our screen so that we can be able to patch the custom controls that we want to send. So we're going to use the patch function. So we just write out patch, and in the patch function, we have to provide the source that we want to send the information to. And then after that, we need to provide, in this case, what update are we sending into that data source. So in this case, because we're creating a new item, we want to create new records, we can use the defaults PowerFX function. So in defaults, we also pass in the maintenance request, which is the name of SharePoint list. And then after that, all you have to do is to just provide obviously those curly brackets and provide the column names of your data source. So in this case, we'll have the title for an example, and title is going to be coming from our text inputs, and one of those text inputs I named it txt title, say txt title.text. And then after that, we do the same thing for the rest of the other fields that we have. So we do it for description. So we're going to say txt.description. So I'm going to be doing this for all of these other fields that we have for our record. Okay, so I put all of the required fields from our SharePoint list so that we can be able to patch new items back into the SharePoint list. So if I format text, this would look something like this. And you will notice something, that one of the fields which is assigned to, I didn't add it. So think about it in a maintenance request kind of scenario where someone enters in a maintenance request, but then a supervisor needs to come in and assign a specific engineer or a specific employee that needs to look into that maintenance request. And we're going to try to mimic that as much as we can, but we're not necessarily focused on that scenario as much as we are focused on just showcasing how you set up the patch function and its functionality inside of Power Apps. So this is what you would have. Now, the thing that you would need to do is to just test it out. And in this case, we're just going to press play and preview the application and fill in some information. So if I click on do stuff, we expect our patch function to work in a way that we're expecting it to send the records back into our SharePoint list. So if I go back to our SharePoint list, hit refresh, we should be able to see new items being added into the SharePoint list with all of the information that we provide in our application. And this is just the normal way of doing a patch function, where you have a maintenance request. And when you are making that maintenance request, in this case, you don't have the assigned to field provided in that specific SharePoint item. Right. So how do we then try to make sure that we update this assigned to, because it's empty in this case? So how do you then use the function, the patch function, to update an existing record? And that's something that we're going to see in a bit. But the first thing that we're going to need to do is to actually just try and add a little bit more off of the data so that we can have something that's working with our application. So I'm going to add a few more fields and a few more records into the application. Okay, let's see how many items we have in our SharePoint list, see if they're showing up. They are. So we're going to see if we can be able to update one of these using the patch function, but not in the way that we've been using the patch function to this point. So let's head back to our application and click on edit. And we're going to go back for an example. We'll see in the main screen that our items are already showing up in the main screen, and you can already see what I was talking about earlier on. If I click one of these, I can already see all of its details. I can be able to make those edits, and it'll use the built-in functionality or functions that came with this template. But if you want more control, you would do it in the way that we're currently doing it inside of the video. So what we're going to do is add, let's say for an example, because we want to update the assigned to field. So what we're going to try to do is add a new control that's going to allow us to make sure that we assign this specific request to a specific employee. So we're going to click on insert. And when we click on insert, we're going to search for a ComboBox. And that ComboBox, what we're going to try to do is make sure that we are able to select a person in the list of options that are available. So how do we then do this? So if I go back to my data sources, I added the Office 365 users connector, and this connector allows me to access all of the users inside of my tenant. And we're going to use that inside of here. I already have some of the patch function, or some of the PowerFX formula that's already been prepared on the side for this. So I'm going to try and make sure that I edit inside of the application itself. So how we're going to do this, we're going to say Office 365 user. So we're going to call the connector itself Office 365 users, and we use the search user v2, and we need to provide the search term, and that search term is going to come from our ComboBox. So we're going to call our ComboBox dot search text, because someone's going to be typing in a name of that specific user. And then we're going to get, let's say, the top 10 of the employees that are available inside of the company. And then we can say, is the search term required? We can put false for an example if we would like. Now, when you are using, we just need to close this a bit further, like at the end. But when you are using the Office 365 search users v2, you need to provide dot value. Otherwise, you won't be able to select the users inside of the Office 365 users connector. So you need to provide that dot value. It seems like I added an extra round bracket here that was not needed, or maybe I am wrong. Oh, I forgot to close the curly bracket. Right. So you need to make sure that you use the dot value at the end so that you can be able to use it. Now, the other thing that we can do with this connector inside of this combo box is, for an example, for display fields, we can specify which fields we want to display. So in this case, we can say we want to see the display name of the employee, and we also want to see the email, for an example. And for search purposes, we also want to do the same. So I'm going to copy this and search for the search fields inside of the combo box and just paste it in. So we want to use the display name as an option to search for the employee or the email itself. Right, so how will that look like? So if we preview the application again, we can then be able to start to see some people inside of my tenant that are available. Okay, cool. Now that does not necessarily use the patch function to assign a specific employee to that maintenance request that came in. So how can we be able to do that? What we're going to need is another button. So we'll leave the do stuff button on the side, and then we're going to insert a new button here. So I'm going to add another button, and I'm just going to drag it here. I'm going to name it update stuff. And inside of this button, on the on select of the button, we're going to provide a patch function, but this patch function is going to be a little bit different from the one that we put for the do stuff, because we want to update an existing record. Like, for an example, we want to update an existing record using the request ID, for an example. So I'm going to grab the one that I have, in which I'll showcase and explain in just a sec. So I'm going to paste it in here. And what you'll see is a patch function that I have prepared on the side. So this patch function, say patch, you provide again the name of the of your data source, and then you use a lookup function. So this lookup function will go into your data source, and then it will check for the request ID, for an example, 1001, and then you provide the record that you want to pass through into your data source. And when you're doing this, especially for the assigned to, I chose the very complicated field, which is assigned to. So in this case, I chose the assigned to, and when you're doing a patch for the assigned to, because it's a person column inside of SharePoint, you need to provide all of those parameters and fields that you need, like the old data type, so that SharePoint can know that this is a person field that you're patching to, and the claims, and you need to provide the email of the specific user in a lowercase format, and then provide the email, the department, and the job title. But it seems like I have a few errors that I then need to be able to quickly check that are not working in this case. So here it's talking about the department column in the data source that I am updating expects a text type, whereas I'm using an error type. For what reason, I might not be able to know. Actually, I know why. So the one that I prepared was using a different combo box. All I just need to change is the number of the combo box, which is ComboBox 2. So it needs to be ComboBox 2 even here, and I just change it here. So it should be fine. So now if I were to run this, if I were to preview the application, I can then be able to see the patch function working. So if we preview the application again, and we come here and we choose myself, and then I click on the button update stuff, that should update stuff inside of our SharePoint list. So if I go back to the SharePoint list, hit refresh, we can see that the assigned to column now has a value. It's no longer empty for this request ID because we hard coded it. But what happens if you want it to be dynamic, right? And that would be a great question, because you want to make sure that you don't constantly update for that very same record, even though you want to update for the second record or for the third record and so forth. So I'll show you in just a second. But the main idea of using a patch function is you can create a record, which is you use the defaults you provide the defaults and you provide your SharePoint list name. Then you provide all of the values for your columns. And then if you want to update a specific record, you just need to use a lookup column, a lookup function inside of your patch function inside of Power Apps, and then you provide which column do you want to update the value for in that specific instance. So what happens here if you wanted to make it dynamic? So we're going to quickly change that. So how we're going to do that is, for an example, if you go back to the main screen and you choose one of those options and you want to update, you want to mimic what happens with this template, where if I choose the conveyor belt repair, and then I come to this form and I update details from here and I press that check mark, it'll update details for the specific for this specific record instead of all of the other ones, and it'll do it dynamically, because if I do it for the second one, it will change those details for the second one. So how can we do this for the can we do this in a custom way using the patch function? So what we're going to try to do is use what's happening on this gallery, whatever is being selected, and we're going to grab that that request ID in that case. So let's add a new screen. So we click on new screen, just a blank screen. And in that blank screen, all we need, so I'm just going to go back and just copy this because we're going to use the assigned to columns. So I'm going to copy my ComboBox, put it on this new screen. And then I'm going to go back again to that screen and go to my update stuff button and put it back on the screen. And in this case, all we want to do is make the updates dynamically instead of hard coding the request ID. And all we need to do in that is just go to the button itself, which is update stuff, just update this patch function. In this case, we're not going to be using the lookup function, right? We're not going to be using the lookup function, and this, if we're not using the lookup function, this would actually impact the performance of our application a bit better in terms of data handling. So if we're not using the lookup function, what are we going to use? We're going to take advantage of the gallery that is already existing on the application. So let's say your app already has a gallery inside of Power Apps, and that gallery has all of the list of your records. When someone clicks on that or selects an item on that gallery, you want to take advantage of that. So in this case, the name of our gallery here is records gallery 1, and we're just going to say .selected. And once you do that, all you have to do now, remember, on the main screen, is to just press that button. But if we go back to the main screen, we can see the first record is the one that's selected, and it has me assigned to that item. So if I go back to screen 3 and we preview the application and we select, let's say Adele in this case, and we click update stuff, that should I'm going to go back to edit mode. That should update that first item, and it should be Adele that is assigned to that record. So if I go back to my SharePoint list, seems like on the app didn't pick up. Oh, it's still me. So let's see if we can do it for one that doesn't have an item assigned to a specific person. So I'm going to choose here the second one, and then I'm going to go back to screen 3. And then I'm going to click on update stuff. And I think that should do it, if I'm not mistaken. So if we refresh on this side, oh, it still chose me as the assigned person. But you can always do it like that. You can see that it dynamically updated it for that second item because I had selected it back. I had selected it back in my gallery. So you can do it dynamically. You can use the patch function, and you can dynamically update values of a record from the gallery that was, for an example, from the gallery that was being utilized to display all of this information. And I think I know why it didn't make the changes. That's because I copied the ComboBox and it looked at this specific ComboBox here that I have on screen 1. So if we go back to screen 3, the name of this ComboBox is ComboBox 2_1. So what we need to update on our button is to just add _1 _1 _1 and do it again _1. And then if we preview the app and we click on update stuff, it should work. So we're able to see that if you select an item on a gallery, it'll be able to say, okay, I'm going to update the details of that specific item in your SharePoint list. So you don't have to use a lookup function inside of your patch function. Yeah. Basically, that's it. You use it in two ways. You use it in a way that, for an example, you want to just create items, which is this case, you use the default function inside of that patch function. Or if you want to update an already existing record, you use a lookup function if you know the ID of that item, for an example. Or in a case where you just want to dynamically do that using the gallery, you will use a formula that is similar to this, which is records gallery dot selected. So you point it to the selected item on the gallery. This was supposed to be shorter, but it ended up being longer because of the debugging. But at the end of the day, I just showed you two ways of how you can be able to use the patch function to create a record, but also to modify the record. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please make sure that you support Power Platform Junkies by subscribing and liking the video if you found it useful. And please share how you are using these different functions inside of Power Platform, be it is a Power FX formula inside of Power Apps or Power Automate, and share your tips and tricks on why you're using them in that case on the comment section below. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.